Okay, good morning and welcome. On behalf of the Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities Skopje and our partners across the international consortium, I'm honored to open this three-day hybrid conference, Overcoming Polarization and Rising Euroscepticism and Erosion in Trust in the Process among Civil Society in North Macedonia and Serbia. We gather today, some of us in the room, others joining us from across the region and beyond, at a moment that demands honest conversation. The public sentiment surrounding European integration in our countries is mixed, and it has grown more complicated. Criticism of the accession process does not always mean opposition to integration. But this illusion, when left unexamined, can become something more dangerous. A consensus built not on facts, but on narratives that no longer require anti-Europeanism to produce anti-European effects. This is the challenges before us. We are not here to fact-check our way out of a post-truth moment. We are here to understand how narratives are built, how they harden into a permanent common sense, and crucially, how the process can be interrupted. The question guiding our work over these 3 days are deliberately uncomfortable. Can a middle ground between skepticism and commitment be created, and is it even necessary? How do we revise grand narratives of national pride without surrounding dignity? How do we distinguish legitimacy critique from misinformation dressed in the language of expertise? They are not rhetorical questions, they are the working agenda of this conference. I want to thank the International Visegrad Fund for making this work possible and our consortium partners, the Andreša Gula German-speaking University Budapest, IPAC Belgrade, the Slovak Academy of Science, the Institute of Central Europe, and the Institute for Modern Development for their commitment to this collaboration. The working language of the conference is English. All sessions are hybrid, and I encourage those joining online to participate actively. Let us begin with our first session. Our first keynote this morning comes from someone whose work sites at the precise intersection of concerns we are addressing this week. Christina Griessler is a research fellow from the Network for Political Communication, NITPOL, at the Andreša University Budapest. She holds an advanced degree from the University of Vienna in political science and cultural anthropology, and has pursued further studies in conflict and dispute resolution at the Trinity College Dublin and Dublin Business School. Her research focuses on the Western Balkans, the EU enlargement process, and the dynamics of the identity-based and ethnic conflicts, with a habitation project examining regional cooperation and reconciliation in the region. She will speak to us today about the liberal influence, Viktor Orbán's regional clientelistic network in the Western Balkans. This is a topic that lies at the heart of one of the thorniest problems in our region, the use of political networks to shape sentiments upon European integration, democratic norms, and the very meaning of sovereignty. Understanding these structures is essential for everybody trying to make sense of how and why the discursive landscape has shifted. Please join me welcoming Christina Griessler. Christina?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Risto. Thanks for the introduction and for the nice words. And thanks as well to the International Visegrad Fund, which makes it possible for us to work on all those important issues in relation to EU enlargement, and as well how narratives are being constructed, and how criticism does not mean to be anti-EU integration. Now, my topic I work on now is something I worked a while on for now some time, and is in relation to the relationship between Viktor Orbán and Western Balkan countries. And I think, we talk about his concept of illiberal democracy and how that might spread into the Western Balkan issues, or in the Western Balkan areas and policies. But I think there's much more going on. So it's kind of I really try to understand what these relationships, what kind of elements are there. So I try to put certain aspects together in that presentation, and I'm really looking forward for feedback, because maybe, I'm missing something here. But for me, the motivation was really to understand why the relationship are important and what's going on in that regard. So I try to share my presentation. So the reason why I start today with this conference, it's an honor actually to open this conference, is that I have other engagements later on throughout the conference. So unfortunately, I was not able to make it personally to Skopje, which I really would have loved to do, but we have a doctoral seminar in later on. Yes. And maybe it's actually a good start in that regard that we now talk about Viktor Orbán's, governance, which is now coming to an end. So it's important to take stock to understand how the relationship was structured and what kind of impact it had on the region, because we will have now new policies being implemented towards the countries in the Western Balkans. So maybe it's actually a good idea to start with that topic. So now I try to open up the presentation, and I hope it works because we all work with different kinds of sets of so I hope everyone can see the presentation. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Thanks. So, so the motivation was really to assess Orbán's policy in the Western Balkans because they were a priority. I mean, in general, Hungarian foreign policy supporting EU enlargement was, or still is actually, a priority for Hungary. And so therefore, there was a lot of engagement happening throughout the time, especially Orbán's, I think, took that very personal, was a personal interest as well. So, and really, I wanted to understand the motivation, the mechanisms, and the idea of those kind of relationships. So the ideas which are underlining or supporting as well those relationships. And to be honest, I started a while ago to look at that aspects, and I started off with the role theory, the theoretical part, and I'm going to have a closer look into the theoretical part, about the role theory, about leadership theories. But now what I would like to add, because maybe, it applies for especially Republika Srpska and Serbia, is kind of the clientelism and maybe local state capture, which that relationship with especially these two entities and states, so in relation to Republika Srpska and Serbia, brought along as well. And we have an asymmetrical relationship because Hungary is a new member and the candidate countries are kind of dependent to have support from EU member states to proceed in their path towards EU integration. For the theoretical part, especially in relation to the role theory, I would like to give an idea about the Hungarian background, the Hungarian foreign policy aspects and the priorities before I go into the bilateral relations. For the bilateral relations, so now between Hungary, and I mean, this is the difficulty now, we cannot distinguish between Hungarian policy from Orbán-driven policies, Orbán was very much behind shaping Hungarian foreign policy in relation to the Western Balkans. And for the bilateral relations, I looked at a number of reports, newspapers, investigative journalists who worked on those kind of topics. And I think that where I just try, really, there's a lot of information out there, really try to bring it together kind of and making sense of all those aspects of it. So as I said, I mean, there is the idea of that Orbán or Hungary in that regard wanted to create this regional leadership role for himself in the Western Balkans. So this is kind of as well the idea of, is it just a regional leadership or is there kind of additional benefits in building up additional benefits, even economic benefits from the relation in the Western Balkans? So that would be the second step. So looking at the regional leadership and then saying, okay, what kind of structures are going built up or were built up to maintain, because a lot of investment flew into the country or loans were provided and so on, so that it may be created as well a system of clientelism where benefits are drawn for Orbán as well. So this is kind of more or less a question mark, because it's kind of a bit difficult at the moment to see really what happened there. But in relation to the position on EU enlargement, Hungary is, and I think is still very clear, and was even very clear under the Orbán government, is kind of very supportive, except Ukraine. That was another issue. But in relation to the Western Balkans, there was no exclusion. Officially, the position was to be pro-EU enlargement. Also, Orbán was EU critical in a lot of aspects, even in relation to EU enlargement policy, because he was kind of pushing for a more political approach rather than the merit-based approach, which created some problems within the European Union. So in a way, Hungary supported the EU enlargement process, but not the way it was actually meant to happen according to EU actors. And that created this difficulty of, undermining in a way EU enlargement, and creating as well the problem that, I mean, we know that the EU became very careful in relation to admitting new member states to the European Union after the enlargement of Bulgaria and Romania, and it took even Croatia a while to be able to join the European Union. And now having even Hungary as a state which is backsliding and is not, keeping in line with the rule of law aspects of the, of its EU membership, the EU became more skeptical about admitting states who might turn into the same direction. So there was kind of so Orbán was kind of supporting EU enlargement, but his political behavior and how he acted within the European networks created a situation where the EU became more hesitant to admit states. And that was especially in relation to Serbia, where, it was seen that kind of a backsliding happened there as well. And the bilateral relations, because it's not, not everything what Hungary provided on assistance and support was actually problematic. The Hungarian government provided a lot of administrative support and assistance to the country to prepare for EU enlargement. So it's kind of difficult. The narratives wouldn't really fit with what Hungary was actually doing. So we had the administrative support, but then as well, we had the support of what Florian Bieber calls and others call the stabilitocracies and the stabilitocrats, like political leaders who kind of were not really too keen to follow more or less the European values in that regard. So when I looked at the bilateral relations, I tried to categorize them somehow, and I came up with three concepts. So either there was really a politically or ideologically alignment with the countries in the region. So we have, for example, North Macedonia in regard to the Gruevski regime, and later on the opposition, which were opposition party later, now in government back. So there were support ideologically that would even fit for Serbia and Republika Srpska. Now, when I come in with my clientelistic network, or my idea about, was there kind of a asymmetrical clientelistic network being established, then I would look to Republika Srpska in one area, and as well Serbia, but more the northern part, the Vojvodina area, where there we have a very strong Hungarian minority party, which kind of acted as a local actor and was applying Orbán's policy in the Vojvodina. And then just sometimes personal sympathy, you can work with certain people, and then you try to work because Orbán offered investments, financial loans, and so on and so forth. So, and sometimes these three ideas were kind of overlapping. For example, we have Albania with Edi Rama. There is not even a political background, a similarity in ideology. It's just that the are able to work with each other. So that's kind of in that regard. Now, if I talk about the theoretical approach, you know, I was kind of looking how to structure or try to explain these bilateral relations and this importance as well for Viktor Orbán to maintain those political relations. But I mean, sometimes it's kind of very simple geographical facts because it's a neighborhood region, and neighborhood policy is very important for Hungary. So it's a Hungarian priority to keep the region stable. So that was always kind of the argument, you know, we are trying to maintain the stability of the region, but some policies, especially in relation to Bosnia and Todic's close relationships, you know, wouldn't fit into that argument. So it's kind of really a bit confusing. But the role theory is one, if we look at maybe Hungary's or more Orbán's idea of taking on a regional leadership role, then it would, you know, go into the direction of social roles. Or, I mean, you can apply the concept of social roles as well to nations. So Hungary takes on a foreign policy role. And there is a lot of literature on that part, and we always distinguish between the ego part and alter part in social roles. So important, and I think I will address that later, is where does the actor, the political actor, come from? So important is identity, social experiences, and as well own perception. The alter part is then how the others see you. So they have to accept you in that role. So acceptance of that role is kind of important. So therefore, you know, it's not a one-way situation where I say, okay, I'm going to take on a regional leadership role. You need the acceptance by the others. And I think this was important that Orbán was trying to achieve that. And my argument is, it's kind of interesting because Hungary has a stronger position in those bilateral relations, but it somehow turned around that Orbán was kind of providing a lot of funding, investments for the region. So sometimes I thought, looking at this relationship, so who is really the stronger part now in that bilateral relations? Because it was kind of always Orbán providing support financially, politically, and so on. And the Western Balkan counterparts just accepting it and, you know, providing maybe this idea or image that they are accepting him as a regional leader. Anyhow, with clientelism, you know, this is a concept I was working with recently, so maybe I just try to apply it now to this bilateral relation aspects. And I have to say it doesn't fit to all the bilateral relations in the Western Balkans, but it's kind of, again, this asymmetry, which is kind of there in the bilateral relations. And it's kind of, you know, the exchange of material benefits for political support. I mean, you could even say, you know, Orbán provided, you know, benefits, material benefits to be accepted. And that kind of created a certain relationship. But with the clientelism, the clientelistic relationship, I think it's kind of the, what happened, I think it was very much built up in the Vojvodina with the Hungarian minority party of the Alliance of the Hungarian Vojvodina Hungarians, which created a system where money was provided and the Hungarian minority party provided political support, was even mobilizing election campaigns for Fidesz in the region, and were again supporting the Vučić government in Serbia politically, and as well on national level as well as regional level in the Vojvodina Hungarian Vojvodina parliament. So, you know, I think this is for me more this idea of clientelism. You know, you get something, you give something. There is kind of this informal hierarchy, even the patron-client relationship. But that kind of destroying social networks and trust within society. And it's kind of disempowerment of citizens. So citizens have to go via, you know, to the politicians to receive certain support. So it's kind of a bit muddy, and it's kind of difficult really to understand who is owning what to whom and where to go to get special support. Related to political clientelism, and it's very hard to distinguish, is the concept of state capture. I think I would see that again as partly in the Vojvodina, and the society capture, which I think happened there as well, that the society is actually not able to freely choose because they're kind of in this dependency network where they are asked to provide certain services or need certain services, but they have to be loyal to certain political parties and political leadership. So clientelism would not fit, I think, for all cases I looked at. Now back to the role theory, because I said we have this alter part and ego part. And I think it's very important where Hungary comes from, because I think we have to understand why, Orbán reacted the way he reacted. And I think he's, very clever politician picking up on issues which were present for the people in the region. So, Hungary was actually a very successful, a case study of a successful political and economic transformation in the 1990s, again with Poland, the front runners for EU integration, and EU integration was always the priority. So in 2004, EU 2004, excuse me, that was my way. 2004, they become an EU member, and before even NATO member 99. And the very important is as well the Visegrad Cooperation, where 4 countries, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and Poland, came together to support each other to prepare for EU integration. That was actually the original idea. And later on, after 2004, there was the decision to keep on working together. And it's kind of, it's a cooperation on political level with up and downs, especially now since 2022, Russia's invasion in Ukraine. The relations between Hungary and Poland were a bit, not as positive. And now it seems there's a new dynamic happening and a new development happening in that regard, which is actually nice to see. But the Visegrad Cooperation, we can broadly as well address this. What I'm saying now might address other countries as well in Central Europe, or countries who have gone through a post-socialist transformation. And the accession to the EU in 2004, there was a bit of a disillusionment after the EU accession after a while. So maybe the expectations were very high. It's unclear, but there was a feeling of being a second EU-class citizens, let's put it that way. I think there was this discussion, as I remember, like the fish finger gate. I think some of the Slovak colleagues might know about that the quality of food is not as good in the countries of Central Europe or compared to Western food standards. So, that was kind of course, cooking along in the societies of the region. So there was a bit of a disappointment, which can happen, I think. There were kind of, could you say, divisions happening, but there is kind of a distinction between the West, the old EU, and the new EU, let's call it that way. And that came to a height in 2015 with the so-called migrant crisis, where countries really felt misunderstood. And then we had all this discussion about, we have other traditions, we have other values, our family values are more important, and the West has different values, or we don't want the old EU imposing their values on our societies. So that was kind of creating as well disillusionment with the EU. 2015, then Orbán actually took up a very strong leadership role, a regional leadership role in the Visegrad cooperation, where it was kind of, with the migrant crisis, we do it the Orbán way or the Merkel way. So there was a clear distinction with two different policies within the European Union. And we had suddenly the issue of, what happened to the EU, the cohesion within the EU. It seems it goes a different way. And we have the concept of Grasse and Holmes saying, sorry, wrong date, it's 2018, with the limitation, with the imitation of the West, so that the Eastern Central European states always tried to imitate the West, but they had to accept that this is not possible. You cannot keep that going because the West is developing further, so you're always lagging behind. So more or less saying, okay, if that happens, we are just not going to imitate the West. We're going to create something new. And this is kind of, the ground where Orbán really was able to use and work on new ideas and narratives, which kind of is also applied to the Western Balkan countries, more or less in that regard, saying, we have gone through all these transitional processes and all the difficulties of, being in historical context, being occupied, being not a free country. So we understand even the Western Balkan countries better than the West does or the old EU. So actually we should be more trying to engage with the Western Balkan countries because we have a different, similar outlook. Now, just very briefly, because that might be interesting for a Hungarian foreign policy role idea, what their perception was. What's important is, first of all, Euro-Atlantic relations or integration is important. So we have that with the EU membership and NATO membership. We have, important is the good neighborly relations aspect. And that's kind of a principle which even the European Union is promoting. That's countries. I mean, we know that in the Western Balkans as well. You have to solve your bilateral disputes before you can actually enter the European Union. So this is a very important principle and kind of as well guiding Hungarian policies. And that is connected again, especially with Serbia, is the support of the Hungarian minorities abroad. So Hungary has a substantial, number or population of Hungarians abroad, not living within Hungary, and that's kind of very, very important that they are providing support for the Hungarian minorities, and that plays a role then as well for Serbia. But then Huska says as well, but there is this sharing of the ideology of illiberalism, populism, and nationalism, which comes along with these kind of concepts for the Hungarian foreign policy. And what I would add is, this idea of Orbán saying, I would like to take up a kind of a regional leadership role, being accepted as a honest broker by the Western Balkan countries. So this is kind of the motivation, I think, for maintaining these bilateral relations. And, and this is kind of the question now, which is, we will look into it. I think it will happen that we might need to figure out what happened to certain amounts of money going to the Western Balkan countries or to specific people or specific parties, if there was as well kind of the idea of having economic benefits by personal economic benefits, maybe as well for Hungary, but as well maybe for Orbán by keeping these relationships. Yeah, very briefly, I discussed it already or mentioned already. Hungary supported the EU, still supports the EU enlargement, but in the later years it became a bit more difficult to play a role within EU decisions. But then it was weakening this merit-based process, based on rule of law conditions which have to be fulfilled before EU enlargement. This idea was kind of, saying it's not that important. We really should take a political decision on on EU enlargement, because there were other external actors there who might have an interest, and so more propagating a more pragmatism in relation to the EU enlargement. We remember there was a EU commissioner, Oliver Varhey. He was kind of really pushing as well for Serbia's accession to the European Union, which didn't go well in Brussels. So there was a bit of a, the EU commissioner pushing for something which the majority of the EU other actors didn't really think was a clever way to do. So there was a lot of criticism there. So there is support for EU enlargement, with all the difficulties, Hungary or Orbán becoming very critical of EU politics and policies in general, and then of course the issue of the rule of law standards not being fulfilled in Hungary. So they're kind of this trying to get out of this merit-based process. And then you had this narratives, which if you had to listen to a foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó. It was really, really difficult, because there were comparisons with EU, with Soviet Union, and kind of Brussels producing communist policies, and so on and so forth. So that was actually narratives the foreign minister was propagating and using in front of Serbian colleagues preparing for EU accession. So I really had the difficulty what kind of message is that? If you just say EU is actually bad, it's like the Soviet Union, they're restricting our sovereignty and so on and so forth, but then at the other side is saying, yeah, but we are going to support your EU accession. So that didn't work very well together, for my understanding, actually. And then, of course, the Western values were not the same as the values for Central Europe and even for the Western Balkans. So there were more traditional values. Hungary also, Christian values were important. Traditional values more based around the concept of national sovereignty. And then there was this idea that Hungary understands the Western Balkan better because they have the same experience or the same shared historical legacies. And of course, we have a direct border to the region. So Hungary was geographically very close to the region. Okay, but that was kind of more the background to the ideas, the narratives, because we talked about this conference is on the concept of Euroscepticism, which I thought Hungary showed this kind of European skepticism, but again supported EU enlargement, was kind of not supporting the values of the European Union because they were not complying with it anymore. But what kind of image would that provide to the countries who are actually preparing for EU enlargement? So it's kind of a rather confusing situation, and maybe with this ideology aspect, it didn't affect everyone in the same way. Maybe I think if we are now going through the individual countries, and I would like briefly to go through the individual countries, and then really to give you an idea, because I really tried to summarize information received from newspapers, government websites, investigative journalists, and so on and so forth. So trying to really try to understand what's really going on. I think this is kind of sometimes not that easy. So we have Albania. So there is kind of Rama and Orbán had very good personal relationships. There were a lot of exchanges and a lot of visits, but ideologically they had actually a different background. But that didn't, that was not really a problem for their, negotiations and their dealings with each other. So there was an identification of relations in 2021, I think, when Edi Rama won the third time, when he was the prime minister for the third time. And there were a lot of official visits on prime minister level, and there was even president's visits in both countries. So there was a bilateral good relationship. We could say it's just a normal bilateral relationship without any major issues here. Of course, there was on basis of state cooperation, we had the Hungarian-Albanian Intergovernmental Joint Commission on Economic Cooperation. So that's not really a huge, different way of doing things on an international level. You could say other benefits. Okay, there were Hungarian investments, so investments were kind of really supported, and of course, for both countries, that was a win-win situation in that regard. So more or less, there was a personal sympathy. The EU accession support was important, and economic investment. So you could just say it's a very normal way of doing bilateral relations. And I think it's important that Edi Rama didn't want, I mean, this is what I've heard from Albanian colleagues saying, Edi Rama was working with Orbán, but he didn't want to have any internal interference into Albanian politics. So it's kind of, you just keep it on a bilateral level, but not letting Orbán kind of creating a situation where he becomes too much involved in the national politics. Now, with Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's more complex. And again, this idea of, supporting EU enlargement, but then actively engaging in activities which are kind of undermining this idea of EU enlargement is super confusing. So therefore, there must be another reason why these relationships were kept. So there was, again, Dodik and Orbán had very good personal level. You can say personal sympathy. There were similar political backgrounds in that regard. We could even say there was Russian influence playing a role here. We had intensification of relations from 2019. So relations were established with the help of Vučić. So there was this triangle, Vučić, Dodik, and Orbán. And there were several visits between the Republika Srpska and Budapest, but Sarajevo was kind of cut out. And that created a bit of a diplomatic frustration, I guess, that Orbán was not that much traveling to Sarajevo. I mean, I think he did a visit in 2023 and went then immediately to Banja Luka. So there was kind of favorism towards Republika Srpska and this the politics here. State cooperation, and that's kind of as well very difficult to really understand how much money went to the Republika Srpska. And I think this is something maybe the new government will look into or will have to look into, because we had several, loans to the Republika Srpska, which was originally 100 million, but now I think it ended up with 110 million. Then additionally, there were grants for companies to buy Hungarian agricultural machinery, about 35 million euro. And then it seems additional were infrastructure projects funds, if I got it right, 150 million. And that was in relation to the sanction, because Dodik was faced with sanctions and a lot of investors withdrew their support, and Hungary stepped in. So that was kind of really important to keep the Republika Srpska afloat financially. I think this was really important. So there was kind of, and therefore I call it this asymmetrical relationship or clientelistic relationship, because Orbán provided funds and money and kind of, but what did he gain back? Just the acceptance of being more or less a good guy or being a regional leader. I'm not sure. I mean, it's so, and this is kind of the issue I have as well. Hungary has a stronger position in this asymmetrical relationship, but sometimes it looks like it turns around, that actually Dodik favored much more from that relationship than Orbán or Hungary in that regard. But, this is kind of difficult. And then on the political level, maybe there was the story, and I was just came back from Bosnia. We are having a discussion if the special forces, the tech police, is still in Bosnia, because there was this issue of the idea that Dodik might be getting arrested. So the Hungarians came with the special police, entered in civilian clothes, so not to be detected, the Bosnia and the Republika Srpska, to, in case, and that's the rumor, that's the story goes, if Dodik should be getting arrested, that they're going to take him out. So first of all, that's a breach of national sovereignty against Bosnia, to just come in with civilian clothed police persons. And again, you cannot take out a guy who is, needs to be, needs to get in front of a court, and if he is being, if he has to be, arrested, then you shouldn't interfere in those kind of situations. But we had that the Gruevski case is maybe as better known in North Macedonia as well. So there's kind of supporting really political colleagues, really trying to get them out of accountability in that regard. So that's kind of really a problem in relation of national sovereignty and what you do. But anyway, with the Republika Srpska, so we have this personal sympathy, the financial support, which is muddy. I mean, if there really that much money came in through different channels and for different reasons, that's kind of what needs to be looked at. I assume there's ideological alignment. There is the rumor of Russian influence, or, it's very clear the Russians were partners in the Republika Srpska, so kind of hear the connection. But the political support of Dodik and supporting his policies, I mean, Hungary was trying to avoid the EU sanctions against Dodik, because they could block that aspect. So there was this political support as well, EU accession support and economic investment. So that's kind of really more problematic aspect. So I put now Bosnia-Herzegovina again on, because we have the difficulty of how can you support EU enlargement of an entire country, but then focusing so much on the Republika Srpska. So on a personal level, then for, on state level, the contacts were not really regular. As I said, Sarajevo 2023, but Orbán went to Banja Luka. But important, I mean, again, and this makes it more difficult, it's kind of really gray. Hungary was very supportive in relation of providing troops to EU for Althea mission, and they provide funds for administrative support for EU accession. So I think this is very important, that Hungary, apart from all these political issues and political and personal relations with certain people and certain politicians in Bosnia, there was, on the administrative level, there was really support provided and proper assistance given to the states. But then we have problems in relation to, you might remember this non-paper floating around in spring 2001. I got that from a Bosnian colleague of mine, where the division of Bosnia-Herzegovina was suggested based on ethnic lines. We don't know who produced that. The rumor went that it was kind of Janša in Slovenia and Orbán having this, thoughts put down on a paper, has never been confirmed in that regard, but it's kind of assigned to Orbán and Janša. Problems again we had, so there was actually agreement between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Hungary for as well a diplomatic support quite recently, but Bosnia cancelled that actually. I mean, it now had, I think, resumed, but Hungary voted against the UN resolution on the genocide in Srebrenica. So he's kind of acting here in the line for Serbian interests. So Hungary was, an actor to foster support Serbian interests, and that was a bit of a problem, and I think that was an issue. So in relation to Bosnia, what's working is kind of the official, declaration that Hungary is supporting Bosnia-Herzegovina in relation to EU accession. But, you know, the activities which are happening, especially in Republika Srpska, is kind of contradicting this kind of official support for Bosnia-Herzegovina. So it's very difficult to understand what's really going on, or what was really going on. I mean, what I hope is that the bilateral relations between Bosnia and Hungary is now going to be changed in and really put on the state level, and that the contacts to Sarajevo were actually intensified. Okay, North Macedonia is, I mentioned already the Gruevski situation, where Gruevski was brought to Hungary and got a political asylum, and now we don't know what's going to happen. Now I think Gruevski has to leave, or maybe he left already. He got political asylum very quickly, and that was kind of facilitated via the embassy of via Tirana. So there was personal sympathy, I think. I mean, the relations to the now current prime minister and chair of the Depna, Mikosi, is kind of good as well. I mean, I cannot really judge that, but it seems that the cooperation is kind of working well in that regard. So maybe my North Macedonian colleague can give me insights in that kind of relationship. But again, ideologically, politically aligned, so the similar political background, and there was even support for the party. So it was kind of a important alliance, ideological alliance, even when Vrmna Dipna was in opposition, because the party received money, from Orban. So this was really, I think, the ideological alignment was very strong. We have state cooperation, so there were a lot of agreements signed. Hungarian-Macedonian Joint Commission of Economic Cooperation. We have economic cooperation agreements, and again, intergovernmental loan for municipalities and businesses in the region. So money was provided again, and there was money provided as well to the party, but I don't have any figures about that one. So North Macedonia, you could say it's personal sympathy in general, this is the ideological alignment, the financial support. And then I think there was a report on and that's kind of interesting, there was an increase or idea to invest a lot in media. So investment in media suggests that you want to strengthen or disseminate your own, worldview in that sense. So kind of dissemination of Hungarian ideas and policies and views. So there was an idea in North Macedonia to actually invest very much in media. There is economic investment, and again, the EU support. I mean, North Macedonian Depna is kind of seen really as a support. It would be a good partner within the EU, because so Orban's idea was kind of having certain political leaders aligned, and then once they're in the European Union, they can form a joint front against the old EU, maybe. Okay, Kosovo, yes, I mean, there is contact not between Orban and the prime ministers, but there is on presidential level at the attempt to keep the good relations. I mean, the Hungarian government recognized Kosovo 2008, so that was the previous government before Orban. So now there was the situation that Orban officially said, okay, we have recognized Kosovo, it's a prospect candidate country, but more or less we're supporting the EU enlargement. So, the visits of the president on presidential levels are nice, but maybe not, political that relevant. But there was really an attempt to keep Hungary as well, I think, from Kosovo side, to keep them, well supportive in that way. But a similar case to Bosnia, that Hungary acted as an agent for Serbia, kind of, and was creating problems in relation to the Council of Europe membership, that Hungary tried to block that one. Then it tried to establish itself as a mediator. So Orbán was trying to establish himself as a mediator, which would not be a neutral mediator if they're kind of working for Serbia. But there was the issue of the Kosovar policemen in 2023, which were arrested by Serbs, claiming that they have crossed the borders, which was disputed from the side of Kosovo. And Orbán officially asked Vučić to release the man, and Vučić released the man. And then it was kind of the idea that Orbán negotiated that deal, but it's not quite clear because, of course, the EU was trying to get the policemen out of Serbian arrest as well. But the difficult situation is this blocking of the Council of Europe membership, because for Kosovo, any membership of any regional organization is very important in the sense of the acceptance, international acceptance. So, I mean, this was kind of really damning to, and it was not really supporting EU enlargement or EU integration of Kosovo to block that issue. We have as well, a loan was promised to Kosovo from Hungary, but that didn't materialize. So there were a slipping of deadlines and so on and so forth. It's not quite clear, but that didn't happen. So more or less the summary, there is economic investment, but it's not really large in that regard. And there's still officially EU accession support, but with limitations, let's say. Montenegro is easy. It's kind of, after Djukanovic left as prime minister and president in Montenegro, so there is not really now a bilateral relationship or personal relationship with any of the prime ministers. There were visits with the previous prime ministers and with the current prime minister. There is intergovernmental agreements on infrastructure. The administrative assistance is very important as well, and economic investments. Again, IT, telecommunication, financial sector, and tourism. But that would be just a more or less regular bilateral relationship where you have economic investment, political coordination, and so on and so forth. And of course, now Montenegro really, really, really very close to be an EU member. And there is the political support for EU accession, which
Christina,
yes,
can you hear me?
yes.
Is there there is not much more time, like 3 minutes. Of
Right.
course, it's until 11:30. Yes, and the main focus is actually Macedonia and
Serbia.
Serbia. If you could move to Serbia,
Yes.
I have a feeling you haven't covered it, or
Yeah, no, I'm coming to Serbia now, and then I'll finish up. Yeah, sorry about this. Yeah. You're
sorry
right.
for interrupting.
No,
just
perfectly.
to allow enough time for
discussions then.
ask, etc.
Okay, super. Thanks very much. Yeah, because everything is interconnected in the Balkans, and I think the
Yeah, you're correct, but
I know. My apologies. I should have really looked into that. Yeah, so for Serbia, I mean, I keep the best for the end, kind of. The Vučić-Orbán relationship is really kind of intriguing and very interesting to look at. And I have, found some nice pictures. I mean, there was a good understanding of what's going on. Vučić even claims that Orbán was his friend, his real friend, and support in the region. So we will see what happens now. But again, I just tried to work on it on the personal level. Vučić and Orbán's, there is a personal sympathy between the two of them. They had a similar political background. So more or less in my checklist, everything fitted kind of for Serbia. Similar political backgrounds. And to be honest, it is very important in relation to the good neighborly relations. The reconciliation process, there was a reconciliation process necessary, and that's actually a good development. And I think this was very well worth pursuing, was this reconciliation process, which already started before Orbán's government in 2004, with the presidents trying to find common ground. 2010, there was a historical commission put together to work on the bilateral relations and really address the difficult historical legacies of the First and Second World War, and it's kind of really as well a dark, a difficult history for both states and both groups. So, so this is actually a really positive development, and I think for Orbán it's very important to keep that going and to intensify the relationship as well, because for the benefit as well for the Hungarian minority in the region. But then, of course, when did the relations on a political level intensify? Once Vučić was with his Serbian Progressive Party was in power. So then more happened there. So we have a state cooperation, then several state partnership agreements were signed. We have a joint Hungarian Serbian government meetings from 2014. We have a strategic council for cooperation, especially in energy and infrastructure. So, you know, energy is very much a close cooperation with Russia, which created kind of problems in relation to oil and gas. For Hungary as well, nuclear energy and infrastructure, the railway line Belgrade-Budapest, built with Chinese companies, you know, support. There was as well a Hungarian company involved, but I'm not sure. So there's a discussion on what the role of the Hungarian company was, but it was kind of a supervision and oversight of the construction. And we had the issue like the accident in Novi Sad, and there was a discussion about what is the responsibility of that Hungarian company in relation to the accident. So that's kind of out there as well, and it will have to be looked at. So why in Serbia? I would call it a regional clientelistic network, strong, you know, a lot of financial support, funding for businesses going in and being distributed as well via, you know, networks which, you know, are kind of intransparent. And I think Peter Magyar has already announced that he's going to look into all those kind of flows of funds. But a crucial local partner was the Alliance of the Vojvodina Hungarians, who acted, you know, for Orbán in Vojvodina, and we have local media which was kind of, you know, promoting Orbán's policies, this clientelistic network. If, you know, you needed something, you had to go via the Alliance of Vojvodina Hungarians to receive some support, and so on. This is kind of really a problematic one, and we will see how that going to develop. Again, the Vojvodina Hungarians are in supporting the Vučić government, so we will see what happens there now, and are in the local government as well in really crucial central positions. And I think very much dominating the cultural, economic and political environment of Vojvodina Hungarians. Then, so yeah, I think I'll bring it to an end here now. We have summary is more or less this. There's a personal sympathy, EU accession support, which was important for Serbia, but in the end fall apart because Serbia is kind of democratically backsliding. The economic investments, the ideological alignment, the Russian influences there. So it kind of fits all the categories. And here again, this is kind of like, I love tables, so I just tried to put it in a table, you know, what the three types of relationships, the ideologically aligned, clientelistic networks, personal sympathy, and others, just to focus on North Macedonia. Do I have everyone here? So for North Macedonia, I would say ideologically aligned. Now again, since 2004, the clientelistic networks didn't happen there. Not yet, or not now. Orbán is kind of, you know, out of office, so it's not going to happen. Personally, sympathies were there. There were business opportunity. The EU accession was important, and the support of the conservative ideological outlook, maybe call it illiberalism or illiberal democracy. As well, for Serbia, it's kind of everything is there. We have the ideologically aligned aspect. We have the clientelistic networks, especially in Vojvodina. We have the personal sympathy. We have the business opportunity, EU accession, the political support and economic benefits. And then as well, there are the business, the Russian interests, and Republika Srpska, because it's kind of connected. again, would fit more or less the same, ideas as, or same concepts as Serbia. And I thank you all for your attention. Sorry that it took longer, because it's a topic I've worked on for some while now. And yes, I think this is why I tried to bring everything together. So thanks for your patience, and I hope that was kind of interesting. I thank you.
Of course it was. Christina, thanks so much. This was so thorough, and I would like to add that this is essentially a presentation based on a paper that Christina wrote for the proceedings that will be published as the result of this, not only this conference, but the research process that preceded this conference. I'm sorry I had to speed up the
No problem.
because I'm sure this is very interesting for discussion, and we already have the next session scheduled at 12, right? Yeah, with the former minister here and professor of law Ljubomir Frčkovski, whom you may know, and some journalists. You know the agenda. We deliberately chose the alternative media, the podcasts.
Yeah.
This time, so we will have a debate with them in 25 minutes from now.
Okay, understand.
But we do have enough time to ask you questions and discuss. I would like to invite first our friend and colleague from the Visegrad Fund, our donor that supports the project, Zuzana Pavlikova, to say a couple of words before we proceed with the conversation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, of course. Great.
It's great. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Christina, for the insightful presentation, and also you, Katarina, for the introduction. I will be very brief. I understand that the time is of essence here. But first of all, seeing that not only our fund, but in fact our region, the Visegrad region, was mentioned as a part of the presentation by Christina, I would only like to say really a couple of words. First of all, as a Visegrad fund, we are glad to support this hybrid conference, as well as the larger project, which the conference is a part of, which deals with the very important topic of a misinformation when it comes to EU narratives, in not just in the whole region of the Western Balkans, but specifically in North Macedonia and in Serbia. Also, I would just somehow like to clarify that when it comes to our region, Visegrad Forum or Visegrad region, our fund is the only institutional arm. So we are the only international organization that represents the Visegrad countries. And our main purpose is to foster regional cooperation. But often it is unknown also in this region that doesn't mean only V4 countries. This means somehow contributing to the richer fabric of interconnectedness within our region, as well as with the neighboring regions. And this is where Western Balkans comes into play, but also, for example, Eastern Partnership, countries of Eastern Partnership. So we also felt that how we do it, well, in the fund, it is exactly through supporting projects such as this one. And what is from our perspective important is that the consortium in this project includes full V4 partnership, meaning all 4 V4 countries, plus Serbia and North Macedonia. So that is really quite an important factor from our perspective. And we really hope that the project fulfills exactly this role, that helps create links that are there, perhaps are not that strong, but also we really hope that the cooperation or the links created within this project survive the end of the implementation period. This is always, I know it's not always easy because obviously everybody relies on funds. This is, I mean, we don't need to be a scientist to understand that, but we really sincerely hope that the cooperation we now see within this consortium, that it will last for the future. So I wish you luck. I know that there are 3 days now, excuse me, ahead of you in this hybrid conference, but I really do hope that this format works for you, because I can also imagine it's not easy to go combine the in-person and online participants, but I believe that you are in the safe hands of Risto and Katarina. So all the best.
Thanks so much, Susanna, for your support, and we're lucky to have you as a program officer, because you know the region so well and you know the nuances here, so it really helps us guide the process in a rather competent, with a competent oversight, let's put it that way. I must just before I open the floor for discussion, I just want to concur with you that it's very important that whatever we're attempting to do here to find a way to live after the project with more or less the same combination of partners, the same institutions, people. For example, Spas has been here, Michal Bit has been here since 21-22. We have been working on similar projects. The first projects, 2 projects were kind of a build-up of on one another, and they were called Avenues of Cooperation. And we tried through that project by building on the examples of, let's put it, intellectual friendships with some Greek colleagues to learn how to build bridges in the most hostile atmosphere of complete polarization between the Bulgarian and Macedonian societies. And in doing so, we managed to complete the project by building a club that was called Macedonian Bulgarian Friendship Club that has been existing for years after the completion of the project. So we tend to kind of yield with something organic in the end. But in this sense, as you pointed out, we are talking about a very specific type of misinformation that needs to be tackled. And I think that we live in an era when simple debunking, just like, fact checking, and this is not a fact, this is a lie, it's not enough. It's not enough anymore. Now it's how you frame the fact, how you build the narrative around it. That's how misinformation is being built. And in particular in North Macedonia and Serbia, this is how the narrative that built this Euroscepticism took place. But I don't want to take too much. My point being, before I conclude, my point being that it's not always, the fact is not there. The fact is there, but the interpretation and the labeling. For example, if you keep insisting on discussing the French proposal, you create in the public the illusion that there is still something to negotiate there, and it is merely a proposal. Very few people in the, for example, in the Macedonian public, even to this day, would know that the so-called French proposal, which is very often called the Bulgarian proposal, is the EU negotiating framework on which all EU member states have agreed. So what is there to negotiate now, except accept it and start EU negotiations? But there is a condition to do so, to recognize the Bulgarian minority. So in the country, so the entire opposition to this condition, to this conditionality, is clouded with rhetoric of paranoia. For example, one of the most famous arguments against the recognition of the Bulgarian minority, even though the Macedonian nationalists would gain from that, because we are gaining a distinction between the two nations and ethnicities through this. The majority is Macedonian, the minority is Bulgarian. So the main opposition to this is its root, its source is actually unknown. And sometimes one wonders if it's actually an opposition to EU accession itself. And now this is used as an excuse. This is one hypothesis. I'm not saying that is the case, but very often this entire conversation is clouded in discourse of the following kind, like you would see experts from the civil society, the social sciences institutes, media, etc., saying, okay, fine, we do not lose anything if we recognize this minority, but who knows what's next? What does that mean? It's almost like, you're having a psychological problem as a society. Okay, I will give you this, which is harmless, but how do I know what stands behind the corner, which is scary? So you already create a perception of the EU setting you traps implicitly. Okay, I'm taking too much of the time by presenting my own paper in this way, but I wanted to explain the logic and the understanding of misinformation with which we operate here. And that is why, to address your comment, it will not be easy to convey that to the wider public. That's why we resort to alliances with alternative media, podcasters, and similar, who can understand the nuances of this kind, but also communicate these messages in a way that is more understandable to the wider public. Okay, sorry, there is still time for others to ask. Christina.
Yeah, may I say something? Because I think I would like to add something what you're saying. Because the narratives, and communication, I think what is really difficult is if it starts to become confusing. So if there's a clear communication and you actually follow up with what you're doing, so your actions are kind of fitting what you're saying, then it's clear. But even I think this was the problem with the European Union, sometimes saying, okay, you should be doing this and that and here, but not even sticking to it, to their ideas themselves is a problem. And I think I have identified with the Hungarian case as well. So there is kind of officially this EU support, but then sometimes engaging in activities which are not helping. And then as well, this idea of, and I think this misinformation or this creates as well of even painting the EU as something negative. In the end, it's kind of in an organization which country want to join. And I think this was for a long time in the Hungarian narrative kind of framed in a negative way, and that put towards the Western Balkan countries, which is confusing when you actually help them to become a EU member. And I mean, even now looking at the Visegrad example, I think this is a very good example of how regional cooperation actually helped the countries to join the European Union in 2004. There was really engagement. There were issues with Slovak Republic, and then it was kind of helped in, and there was this really support there. And I think this was the idea as well, to create this regional cooperation among the Western Balkan countries and create this kind of positive effects and put it into the region. And I think it's kind of really difficult now because the timeline for EU enlargement has been that long. So the countries do not see when they might be able, to become EU members. So there are a lot of aspects now which makes the whole situation more difficult, and that fosters miscommunication and misinformation. And I think this is the difficulty. And I think Hungary maybe didn't play a very constructive role for a while, and we will see how that goes. I'm kind of thinking this is going to change now, but we don't know what kind of direction that goes. But of course, it's kind of good to analyze the past and see maybe what could be done better in that regard.
Thanks, Christina. Does anybody else have a question or comment on Christina's presentation? Maybe ask her something. Philip, would you like to
No,
come
no.
or
No problem.
or should we turn the camera?
Yeah, either way, but you're.
Hi,
Hi, hello.
hi. I'm Filip Stanovsky from Metamorphosis Foundation, and what I'm interested in at the moment is about what could be predicted about the, how can I say, anti-corruption activities within Hungary with the change of the government, and how they would reflect on the Western Balkans, because we have in several countries different type of really economic cooperation, let's say, let's put it euphemistically, including support for propaganda media in North Macedonia and different loans, which are related also to different other stakeholders across the world in geopolitical sense. So what do you expect, whether this there would be some investigations where these results would be shared, and how it would reflect on the whole region?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Very interesting questions. Yeah, we will see. I mean, there is going to be now a process of, looking at corruption in Hungary in a broader sense. So that will take time. So I think they're working on that now in relation to the Western Balkans, because this is connected as well, because of the corruption within Hungary. Corruption was able to take place in the Vojvodina as well, with the acceptance of Vučić. So Vučić didn't object to that. But I think Magyar Péter already said he's going to visit Vojvodina in summer. So there is kind of now, he's proactive going into the region. He's going to engage as well with the alliance of the Hungarian Vojvodina Hungarians, which kind of is in relation to Fidesz, kind of the local agent of Fidesz, but they're going to engage. And I think he declared that he's looking into all this money transfers in the region. So, I mean, it's important to create transparency. I mean, and this is something, it's an EU rule kind of, anti-corruption mechanisms have to be put in place, make transparent. Maybe some of I assume that some of the funding was actually, in order and kind of, supporting Hungarian businesses in the region. Why not? But I think it has to be transparent. This is the most important thing. And then there might be, this investments are, just normal business. And then we have to see in what channels and who got what and what kind of money and in what way. And I think this has to be looked at. So I as far as I know, and as far as I've heard, for the Vojvodina, so for Serbia, this is going to happen. I think they are going to look back for 10 years. So what happened the last 10 years in the region. But I think actually it needs to happen as well for Republika Srpska, where it's kind of really difficult to understand how much money in what kind of channels and who got what in the region. I mean, supporting, businesses, creating investment, and creating investment is something Magyar Péter wants to keep up, which is normal. This is a normal business transaction. So this is going to be maintained, but I think it's just this transparent payments. And again, yes, buying media to use to influence maybe the public sphere. And this is something which needs to be looked at. And I think it will happen. But, it's kind of difficult at the moment because a lot of things need to happen. And there's a long agenda of things. But with Serbia, it might happen already this summer, the start of it, at least.
Thank you, Christina. If there is no other questions, okay, we're gonna make, sorry, Susanna.
Thank you, Rista. Only occurred to me while I listened to both Katarina and Christina, just to share with you that, in fact, just as the Visegrad 4 region has the Visegrad Fund, the Western Balkans region has a Western Balkans Fund with a seat in Tirana. And you might argue that, yes, maybe perhaps at the moment, it's not on a par in terms of the volume of the funds that they have at the disposal to support projects in the region. But I do believe that it is a step in that direction of institutionalizing. But I'm not saying the institution itself is the great thing, but it's just a factor of the region recognizing that unless there is some regional cooperation, it's very hard to move towards the EU integration on their own, and there's things that they can learn from each other. So I only wanted to mention that, and hopefully one of the colleagues from the fund can join you during other online presentations.
Thank you, Susanna, for this remark. Okay, we're gonna have a little break. We are running late, so we are continuing with the panel with a 5 to 10 minutes after the 5 to 10 minutes break. Thank you all. Thank you, Christina.
Thanks to everyone. Thank you. Thanks.